Now that's a lot of damage!
Oh boy, Enterprise. You guys ever have those days where you just have an enemy that you want to get rid of real quickly? Or those days when someone is being really annoying and you don't want to have to deal with them anymore? Well, let me tell you guys all about a ship girl that... Do I even need to say anything? I mean, she's the face of this game after all. The odds of you guys not knowing who this character is... There's no way you guys don't know who this character is. But anyway, for those of you who are relatively new to this game, today we're diving into the devastating backliner carrier from the Eagles Union called Enterprise. Like Illustrious before, she's one of the many SR carriers that exists in this game. Despite being an SR, I highly doubt anyone has never seen this character. I mean, she's everywhere. I mean, she's in event and story cutscenes, occasionally she's in the exchange shop when it's not San Diego, maybe she's even blessed you in her builds, I don't know. Oh, and she's everywhere in PvP. I mean, you literally cannot have a single PvP match without Enterprise being in there somehow. So the real question is, how good is the one and only Enterprise? I know for many of you, I don't really need to say much, and, well, I honestly believe most of you have already heard plenty about her. But in all honesty, that's not being fair to Enterprise, so let's dive into this carrier and see why she has one of the highest, if not the highest, pick rates for a character in the backline. Diving into her stats, Enterprise has an overall decent stat line to boast. Her health seems about average for a lot of carriers, if not a bit on the low side. Her medium armor also does help with that, as, well, the overall damage dealt isn't as bad as it would be if it was light armor, you know, like those glass cannons. Her reload is a tad bit low for your average backliner if you were to consider, you know, battleships with them, but honestly it's a little bit higher than most carriers. Her evasion also low, but that's again normal for most backliners. Her anti-air stat seems almost on par for most carriers, if not a tad bit higher. I will at least say that she does sport a higher evasion when compared to carriers like Illustrious, Akagi, and Kaga, Victorious, or even Graf Zeppelin. She does have a noticeable difference in her aviation stat when compared to the Fox twins, which is something to consider when aviation is, well, it's a carrier's main source of dealing damage. One last thing worth mentioning is her luck, which is absurdly high compared to a lot of other carriers, or just characters in general, honestly. However, if you were to know how her historically accurate counterpart was, then I'd honestly say that this luck stat's pretty accurate. Enterprise has a good stat line when compared to other carriers of her rarity, but that doesn't really mean much. Most of that really just means that she's just better than average. We'll have to dive in a little bit more to see all that makes her really special. Something I do want to mention real quick is her equipment. For those of you who don't know, not every carrier runs the same 3-3-3 setup, which I honestly want to believe is the carrier standard. Sometimes they'll have an additional fighter like Illustrious, or maybe they'll just have double torpedo bombers. Thankfully, Enterprise uses the standard 3-3-3 setup as she has a slot for fighter, dive bombers, and torpedo bombers. She will start with one of each plane and move up to 3 once limit breaks have been reached. She also gains a nice few bonuses on top of that. Again, so far, she just sounds like your average SR carrier with some slightly better stats. But what if I told you that Enterprise's real strength lies in her skill? Lucky E. Or, okay, well... Do you have to say that every single time I'm gonna talk anything about this, or just you in general? Anyway, this skill has a 70% chance to proc upon Enterprise releasing her airstrike. When this skill does proc, the airstrike she released now deals double damage, so it's absolutely going to hurt whatever is on the receiving end of it. In PvP, this skill is responsible for the deaths of several Vanguard members. However, there is one that can survive the Lucky E, and in even some cases, not even flinch. However, there is a second part of this skill that is also a huge advantage for Enterprise. Upon activation of this skill, Enterprise also gains complete immunity to incoming attacks for 8 seconds. So not only does she deal a ridiculous amount of damage in a short period of time, but she also becomes completely, well, I can't say completely, but pretty much impervious to enemy attacks as well. The one thing that I will definitely say is that she's not completely immune to all damage, as collision damage will still affect her. So I guess Glowworm could teach her a few things. If she can survive past the barrage and everything else that's being thrown at her. However, this skill is really the reason she dominates in Ian's PvP. Well, for now at least. With this stat line, along with a god tier skill, Enterprise has quite the nasty setup for just about anything and everything that the Eagle herself doesn't like. If you're fighting against her in PvP, you better pray that the skill doesn't proc, or that her plane equips are just straight up terrible. It has happened. Honestly, it has. All in all, she's quite the powerful ship that many don't want to pick a fight with. Now onto the big question. Boss or mob fleet backline? While I think that she can work in both, I still very much believe that she's best utilized in a boss fleet, as she will literally the boss. Just remember that she's a carrier and therefore can't protect herself. The invulnerability of her skill can also help her to tank some damage if the boss decides to attack her. The survivability can help if a boss or an elite decides to attack your backline over your vanguard. As I did mention earlier, she can be used in mob fleets as well, and I think the same points could be used in her favor there. But honestly, her damage potential is high enough with a 70% proc chance that she's honestly better off in a boss fleet. Unfortunately, her skills don't really particularly synergize with anyone, but it is worth mentioning that characters that can affect Enterprise's damage output, like Helena, can prove to be quite the nasty combo to have. I guess Cleveland does also work here, but remember that her, and I guess even then to some degree Helena's proc rate isn't the best and also can come with poor timing. So really either of them may not be the best choice for that. Now if you're wanting to squeeze out every potential little bit of damage from her airstrikes as possible, you could also do a light carrier that has the aviation bonuses that either the Long Island or Soho retrofits do. I will say that I've actually had an interesting time with Enterprise and Long Island. These two have been pretty much stealing they've been pretty much stealing MVP from each other. Way too much. Not to mention they've also both been a part of pretty much defeating 2 EX bosses in my playthrough so far. Then again, Long Island does have a very powerful skill that, you know what, I'll just touch on another day. Overall, Enterprise is a devastating carrier capable of dealing massive damage to her enemies. Her stats alone aren't that ridiculous, but combined with the skill that she does have, and they make for a very dangerous threat for all that oppose her. She can wreak havoc to a fleet boss or mobs in PvE, as well as annihilate player-built fleets with her skill in PvP. She is well worth acquiring and leveling, as she has been a major factor in taking down a lot of the bosses that I've dealt with so far. So I seriously recommend obtaining her by whatever means possible. And, well, I think you'll see what I mean. Heck, if you even PvP with her, you might get the rare stare-down showdown with another player's Enterprise. To be completely honest, that's like the most stress-inducing thing I've ever had happen to me in PvP. But until then, well, I hope you don't mind hearing the enemy Enterprise saying "Owarida!" And that'll be all for Enterprise. Hope you all enjoyed and that this will help you in your future endeavors. As usual, the list continues to grow. God, it's almost going to take up more than one screen soon. If there's a ship girl you want me to cover that I do not have the list and have not covered yet, then let me know in the comments and I will cover them in the future. Up next is Graf Zeppelin. I think I said her name correctly. Oh. I'm just gonna warn you all, I have no clue how to pronounce any of the names correctly of the Iron Blood faction. Maybe Prince Eugen, but even then I don't even know if that's correct. So I apologize in advance for that. Anyway, look forward to that video and I will see you all in the next live stream or video that I do. Thanks for watching and I will catch you guys all again later on.